This is Cloud and Sec, a channel about cloud and cybersecurity. Today I'm talking about cloud security and how your cloud access security broker or a solution of this kind can help you discover potential malicious applications that your users are accessing. Let's dive in. Alright, so just kicking off with the definition of Defender for Cloud Apps. Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps, it's the CASB part of Microsoft's Extended Detection and Response Capabilities, or XDR capabilities. Looking at the product description or the solution description, we get to see why CASBs are so important for modern environments. Essentially, we're looking at four key aspects of what CASBs deliver. Visibility for IT administrators to understand what SaaS applications their users are accessing, and also visibility into how they're accessing, how they're interacting with those cloud services. We're going to have a look at what that looks like in the dashboard soon, but that's a very important part of CASB. Next is data security. What is done with corporate data in that environment or those cloud services? Have you got any sensitive information being exchanged or potentially exfiltrated to these services? We can manage that and control that. Next, we're looking at providing threat protection, so mitigating malware and naturally providing access control to these services as well. Matter of fact, access control policies based on the nature and the risk assessment of these cloud services is key and a fundamental aspect of Microsoft Zero Trust. And lastly, we're also assessing and providing information back to administrators and security analysts about the compliance aspect of those clouds. So those services, do they abide to GDPR? Do they abide to specific standards that are relevant to their industries? If not, we can bump up the risk score of those relative SaaS applications and provide different rules and different policies based on that. So a very quick look at the main capabilities of CASB. Now, I highly recommend you have a look at this document later on to further understand this thoroughly. But taking a next step forward into our discussion here today, which is a high-level overview of this, what does a CASB look like from a deployment perspective? Well, essentially, there are two different kinds of CASB. One that sits inline, so it inspects an inline traffic coming from user devices back to cloud applications. Or a second type of CASB is based on API connections to these cloud services. And so different methods allow different features to be enabled by these solutions. But essentially, as you can see on the screen here, this is the architectural diagram or representation of what Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps supports. So both methods can be deployed. And there are different features, as you can see here. Cloud traffic allows for the proxy and for this access and session controls to be enforced in these sessions. Otherwise, API-based can have a look at app connectors, and even cloud discovery can come from firewalls or proxies logs that are ingested into the platform as well. So different ways to implement the solution, especially Defender for Cloud Apps, allow for different capabilities. But the takeaway here is that the solution itself supports a wide range of deployment methods that covers and encompasses all the potential use cases that CASBs are needed for. Next, I'm jumping to Microsoft 365 Defender dashboard. This is where we can manage and essentially monitor Defender for Cloud Apps information into the Microsoft security stack, essentially. Historically, there would be a different dashboard with a different URL to manage it. I'm not going to touch on that because by now Microsoft is essentially importing everything from that platform into this dashboard to make it a more concise experience for user analysts, or a more improved way for user analysts to interact with the tool. Great. Now, as an XDR platform, as Defender does, it integrates everything. It correlates information regarding user information back to, from AAD back to potential incidents happening at devices for those users, and so on and so forth. I'm not here to cover the XDR capabilities of Defender, of 365 Defender, but what I do want to highlight in the dashboard is where you can find Defender for Cloud Apps information. So if you scroll the menu on the left-hand side here, all the way to the bottom. The second to last option here, or section, is called Cloud Apps. So that might be collapsed, so you just expand it, and then you can see all the different aspects of the solution or the platform. And even further down at the bottom, you can see where you manage policies, right? So you can consume information naturally, but also following Microsoft's security workflow. At the bottom, you can see policies to set up policies for it. What I'm going to do next is jump into policies. So here I am. I'm just looking at policies and policy management of Defender for Cloud Apps. As you can see, we have a range of alerts here. I'm not going to touch on everything that can be done from a policy perspective. What I just want to highlight is the 4 different kinds of policies that can be created for the platform. First and foremost, threat detection policies can be set up. I could go through the policy creation example. So all these enabled here at the bottom are essentially enabled in my platform. And I could create an even more policies based on activity or on OAuth application that is communicating with my user accounts, for example. I could also look at information protection based policies that are looking at different ways that information protected files from my organization is being consumed or utilized by my users. I can also look at conditional access. I don't have any in my tenant right now. I can even look at shadow IT, looking at risky applications in my environment. Now, under all policies, I can see a list of all policies that are enabled in my tenant. So just as a highlight, and I can even see the count of active incidents for each of these policies. Now, from an administrator perspective, I can also, for each one of these policies, set up an alert for each one of them, an alert that is triggered depending on different factors, but that is sent out to email addresses, for example, just for notification, for example. There are other ways to get these incidents sent out to your analysts naturally. So there could be SIEM that they would consume that from, or there could be an API-based alerting that you would prefer. That can also be done, but the simplest way that is built right into the policies can be to send out an email. Next, I want to have a look at what Defender for Cloud Apps delivers to you as a security analyst or as an administrator. Starting off with Cloud Discovery. Essentially, Cloud Discovery tells us what applications are being utilized by our users and a little bit about these discovered applications. So right now I'm just looking at Cloud Discovery here. I can have a look at the dashboard, see what app categories are identified and categorized by the platform in my environment. I can also see the risk levels associated with data in the environment. So I can see that there's 180 megabytes in my environment that has been transacted with medium risk applications, 291 at low risk applications. I can also see discovered applications utilized by this particular user in my environment, which is or a few users in my environment rather, in here, as you can see on the right hand side. You can also see headquarters of these applications so that I understand where my data is going to. If I navigate to Discovered App tab, I can see more about these discovered applications. I can filter them. I can understand what is the most utilized application based on upload size, for example. So where is my corporate data going to most, apparently, versus everything that is happening in my entire environment. From this chart right here, I can also see the column called Actions. So we're going to see this later on in the policies, but for every single discovered application, we can take actions. So sanction, approve that application to be used by our users, or we can unsanction it, stating that we should actually be blocking access to this particular application because of different reasons, right? So perhaps risk score, or perhaps a business decision because this is not approved to be utilized at work hours, for example, or whatever other reason there might be. There's a lot more that we could get into here. We can filter this better based on risk scores, the lowest that I could think of. Let's see if there's nothing too risky in my environment, but if I had a look at a risk score of 5, there you go. There's some applications that are of questionable security according to some of these profiles. For each one of these applications, I can click on them and find out more about this, each of these applications. So these reports are coming from Microsoft's intelligence. They're telling me whether these applications are compliant or not. For the purpose of demonstrations, I logged in there in this particular event to generate some events. And so you can quickly have a look as an administrator what kind of applications my users are consuming in my environment and take action on them. I can also have a look at resources that have been discovered based on specific URL data that we're targeting. Having a look at IP addresses in this environment, users, and so a list of users, related transaction numbers, amount of data that's been uploaded to the cloud services, and we can even have a look at devices as well. Now, if I go back to other capabilities or to the menu, I can have a look at the Cloud Application Catalog. It's a similar view from what we've seen before, but this is according to the entire catalog, not what has been discovered versus in our environment, right? So this is the entire Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps application catalog, and we can have a look at what applications we can expect to be discovered by the platform, for example, right? So this is where I would go as an admin to understand what does Defender for Cloud Apps know about a particular cloud application that's out in the wild that might be in my radar for particular policies or particular business reasons, right? So I could be performing proactive assessment right from this page. Next, managing OAuth applications. I don't have any in here, but if my users were authenticating with my corporate credentials to a third-party service, I could have a look at here. And if I had files that are protected, I could have a look at these particular files, where they've gone, what's going on with my corporate-owned files in my environment or my third-party services, based on the policies that we'll set up. Now you could have a look at other features of the platform as well, such as the activity log, what's going on in my platform from an administration perspective. I can see that this particular admin has been creating and changing sanctioned and unsanctioned information for particular applications, so understanding how it's being governed. And I can also have a look at the governance logs as well. So what is going on from an application perspective. The use case that I found here for this particular security solution or security control is really looking at a very hot and in-demand application that is cloud-based called ChatGPT, or OpenAI's ChatGPT. As you know, ChatGPT is based as a cloud service. So it's based on chatgpt.openai.com service accessible via the web. As such, it is a SaaS. As such, it can be controlled via a CASB solution like Defender for Cloud Apps. So what have I done? I created a risky application policy. So if I look into this policy particularly, I can see that I set out the policy severity to high severity, so I can choose what this policy will be raised as. And I stated that I wanted applications matching specific criteria to flag against this particular policy. I chose legal risk factor for data ownership. So again, we're looking at assessing these cloud services, and if there is ever an assessment that turns back with legal risk factor of data ownership equaling yes, then this will get flagged, but also an application and domain that matches whatever domain I entered in here. In my example, I'm looking at openai.com. So if someone uses that or tries to access that domain, this gets flagged. Now this will apply to a number of users. In my example, I chose to flag this in my environment for whenever there is more than one user consuming or applications that match those rules. And what do? I create an alert for my administrator. And lastly, from a governance perspective, I could perform a few actions. I chose to tag the app as monitored because that makes it easier for me as an administrator to then take actions based on cloud discovered applications and so on and so forth. I could also choose to tag it as a custom tag. If I wanted to manage it differently, I could add a tag written OpenAI or written ChatGPT, for example. We would have to tweak the policy a little bit to match that specific class tag, but it could be done so that you can easily find that application later on in your reports. Cool. So what does an alert of this particular policy look like from the administrator perspective? I'm just jumping into this particular incident for one of my users, my test users, I rather say. So this right here is ChatGPT discovered under the openai.com domain. As you can see, this has been tagged as monitored. It has been covered under the continuous report for Windows 10 devices. This is a Windows 10 machine that I generated this from. And having a look at this, we're actually looking at the application assessment from Microsoft Defender for Cloud Apps. So I can see the cloud application score based on a number of different metrics. And I can even have a look at the score breakdown of this application. I can also have a look at the usage of how many users have consumed this application. So I only have one user, one IP, one device, and 87 kilobytes of data have been sent out or exchanged with the platform. I can even see here the specific users who are interacting with this application and even the alerts, right? So the next, I want to look into the information about this cloud application. So again, powered by the cloud assessment developed and delivered by the platform itself. It tells me what the application is, as explained by Microsoft themselves. We can suggest an improvement. There are disclaimers to understand where this came from. We also have different score assessments. Again, looking at a general domain or general characteristics here section, looking at when it was created, who is the actual company behind this, what data types are exchanged or utilized by this platform. Does it have discovery recovery plan? So this right here is an information that I as a user, I wouldn't care, but me as a security professional would take some time to actually find out. So this is provided to me right off the bat. I can also have a look at domains, right? So how many domains are associated with this application? Where can I find the terms of service? Everything a click away from my perspective. Next, looking at the security section, this is critical for us to assess the risk factors of these applications. In my example, I want to lock down this particular application, but if I ever wanted to assess the risk of these applications, I could look into this report prior to making or performing specific policy actions in my environment. So then I can see what is the user audit trail, what is the admin audit trail, what password capabilities it potentially has. Now for each one of this, there are reasons. The eye icon here at the bottom tells me why this was actually flagged as a yes or no, but also there's a comment so that you can suggest an improvement in case one of these is inaccurate in some ways. So right here we can see and assess a little what kind of security measures are implemented by the platform and that perhaps we don't want to expose our users to, or perhaps we want to understand a little bit better. Next is compliance and legal. Again, so this here is really looking at how those services are taking compliance standards back to their environments and abiding to them. Sometimes they're not relevant to their industries, but sometimes they are. And so it's good to know that, for example, OpenAI is SOC 2 compliant, or they are GAP compliant, and so on and so forth. even GDPR and DMCA compliant. So a good look at security controls and information about this application. Lastly, when I jump into cloud application usage, I can actually see what my environment or my organization, how my organization has interacted with this application. So if I scroll a little bit here to the bottom, I can see how many users have used it, when, and the total traffic that was exchanged, number of transactions, how much data was downloaded, how many devices have interacted with it, and there's even a richer breakdown of name of users, name of devices interacting with it, and even more information if required. If I wanted to see just alerts related to this particular application, I could see here that there is this new risky application or new risky app policy that was flagged for this particular application. That was the name I chose for that policy, and that was flagged, and it's still open. So potentially leading me as an analyst to actually take care of this particular incident or alert as required. Now, to close up, what can I do with this application from Defender for Cloud Apps? Top right corner there, you can see the Actions button. So you can tag an application as sanctioned, meaning it's good, users are all good to use it, or rather it's unsanctioned, so they're not supposed to be using it, and we should just block them access to this application, or it's being monitored. So we're still just monitoring its usage, defining how the business is gonna take on the relationship with this particular cloud application. And lastly, there's more cloud applications here. So we can even choose to deploy conditional access application control. So this would get into assessing user information, or rather more user details and session details before allowing them access to this particular cloud application. So that could get really granular into what kind of controls are enforced before a user even access it. A use case that I have not deployed or mentioned here today in this particular use case. But we could even request score updates to Microsoft. We could add the application details or perform specific new policies and further control into this cloud applications. So this was a very quick look at what Defender for Cloud Apps is. Some of its capabilities, a very high level look at its 4 main capabilities, where you can get more information on, and what a very initial use case can look like for a hot in-demand application such as ChatGPT or OpenAI's domain. Hopefully this has been informative, and if you like, please do. If you like the video and the content, please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you. See you next time.